Most of the time we do head-to-head videos, we're comparing smartphones of the same class, flagship against flagship, mid-range against mid-range, and so on. That keeps things fair, and that tends to be what most people want to see. But sometimes the opportunity arises to mix and match a little, to bring two devices from separate device classes side by side and see how they stack up. That may not be as fair from a specs perspective, but it's still useful to buyers because sometimes people need to know whether they should consider switching categories. If the questions I've been getting on Twitter are any indication, that's definitely the case here. Android smartphone shoppers want to know whether they should stick with Samsung's flagship smartphone offering, the Galaxy S3, or take the leap into phablet territory with the new Galaxy Note 2. So, let's take a tour, do some benchmarks, and see how these two superphones stack up. I'm Michael Fisher, this is Pocketnow, and this is the Samsung Galaxy S3 versus the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. Sitting side by side, two things are very clear about these devices. They're very obviously from the same manufacturer, and they're clearly in different categories due to their size. The Galaxy S3 often feels like it gets close to tablet territory itself with its big 4.8-inch display, the largest panel in smartphones. But it doesn't even come close to the massive screen on the 5.5-inch Galaxy Note 2. They're both Super AMOLED displays covered by Gorilla Glass 2, but they feature the same 1280 by 720 resolution, resulting in a higher pixel density on the Galaxy S3, 306 ppi, versus the Note 2 at about 267 ppi. Now, as far as colors go, setting both screens to half brightness reveals they seem pretty close to on par here. Occasionally, the Note 2's screen looks a little warmer to me, with maybe a touch more saturation, but it's so minor my eyes might be playing tricks on me. Also, I should note here that I've set the screen mode on the Galaxy Note 2 here to standard, not the oversaturated dynamic I prefer for everyday use. I don't have a screen mode option on my American Galaxy S3 here, not because it's a Galaxy S3, but because it is a US carrier variant. We'll touch on that again in the software section, but to wrap up the display discussion, these screens are very, very, very similar. Pixel density enthusiasts won't like the Note 2's lower PPI rating, but it doesn't bother me at all day to day. From an external hardware perspective, Samsung's made a big effort to unify its design philosophy with these two phones. They're very obviously close siblings, right down to this glossy, slippery skin oil magnet that Samsung calls its hyperglaze coating. You can see it's already... I'm wiping these off every 2 seconds, and they're both just getting smudged up like crazy, so no advantage on either one there. They're both the fingerprint magnets. The Note 2 is quite a bit heavier in the hand. It's 183 grams versus the Galaxy S3's 133 grams, and it's also thicker, 9.4 millimeters versus 8.6. But that doesn't ruin the experience. In my use, it actually made the Note 2 feel a bit more premium, and that's a feeling that's also helped along by the Galaxy Note 2's thicker battery door, the lack of a visible seam on the silver bezel, and at least on our review unit, a clickier, more responsive home button. Now that comes at the slight cost of ergonomics. The SGS3 is definitely the prettier of the two, in our opinion, with its rounded Riverstone design. Though the Note 2 is more streamlined than its predecessor, it's still got a pretty blocky design when compared with the Galaxy S3. Otherwise, the only visible difference comes on the back, where Samsung has moved the speakerphone from the top to the bottom of the device. There's the same 8-megapixel 1080p camera around back here, and the same 1.9-megapixel camera up front. Even minor components like the earpiece grill seem to be recycled between these two devices. And obviously, you can see the LEDs flashing away on both. Always nice to see notification lights on modern devices. Kudos to Samsung for continuing that trend. Finally, wrapping up the hardware tour, it's worth cracking open the battery door here to have a look at what's powering these devices. The differences in power source are visually very, very apparent, with the Note 2's 3100 mAh battery dwarfing the Galaxy S3's 2100 mAh pack. Now, that's the look and feel. Let's talk guts and software.
Now, as I mentioned before, this is the US version of the Galaxy S3, so it makes it a little bit tricky to compare with the Galaxy Note 2 and its international specs, but not too tricky.
Most notably, the Galaxy Note 2 is powered by an Exynos 4412 quad CPU. That's the same as most international versions of the Galaxy S3, except running at 1.6 instead of 1.4 GHz, but it's not the same as we've got in this Verizon Galaxy S3, which is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 dual-core CPU. Now, we've had some lengthy discussions and articles at Pocketnow describing the differences in processor architecture between these SoCs, so we won't go into it too deeply here, but the Exynos Quad in the European Galaxy Note 2 here is the same CPU that will come in the US version, and there's also 2 gigs of RAM in each of these devices, so it is a relevant comparison if you're an American shopper. They're not running the same software, though. Like many Americans, I'm still stuck at Android 4.0.4 Ice Cream Sandwich on this Galaxy S3, waiting for a carrier approval of the Jelly Bean update. However, the Note 2 is shipping with Android 4.1.1 Jelly Bean. The newer software, with TouchWiz running on top, of course, has brought the usual Jelly Bean improvements. We've got improved notifications right here. We've also got Google Now running down in multitasking view, there that is, and, of course, the increased fluidity promised by Jelly Bean's Project Butter improvements. But honestly, TouchWiz on ICS on the Galaxy S3 runs so well that I haven't noticed much improvement in UI fluidity. Maybe it's just that the bigger screen shows flaws more readily when they're there, but in any case, like the screen color question, the UI performance is almost identical between these two devices. We'll be listing the full array of benchmark scores in our full review, and we'll put them in chart form so you can compare them easily across devices, but in the meantime, just know that the Galaxy Note 2 scored 13,590 in Antutu, 5439 in Quadrant Standard, in LinPack single-thread 63.8, LinPack multi-thread 92.319, and SmartBench 2012 49.94. Those scores beat out those of our US and international Galaxy S3s handily.
So, how does that performance translate to real-world use? Well, this is the boring part to some and the exciting part to others. Whatever the case, it wouldn't be a comparison video without a boot time test and a launch-off.
So in the real world, you want your phone to start quickly and you want apps to launch quickly. So let's boot first. Power button is on the right on both these devices. 1, 2, 3. Boom, there's a Galaxy Note. Verizon version takes another second. You have to hold the button actually longer on that version. That is always interesting to see when a carrier or a manufacturer makes that decision to change that timing and why. Now we're going to go sit through some carrier splash screen on the left, obviously, whereas the unlocked version on the right is obviously going to boot more quickly. Also, these devices are not fresh out of the box. The one on the left has been my daily driver for quite a while, so it's got a few more apps than the Note 2. But the Note 2 I've been testing pretty aggressively for the past few days, and it is loaded up with apps as well. So, obviously not a scientific test, but also very nice, and there's the US version. Also very nice to use some phones that have actually had some use put on them and are not still in factory fresh condition, which also doesn't tell us much, so we don't feel too badly about that. Now, app launch speeds are also important. Now, some are more important than others. We've kind of gone through the boot sequence here. We're connected to a Wi-Fi network on each side. That's nice. Let's go ahead and launch the camera. Most important, you don't want to lose any shots. Sorry about the glare here. 1, 2, 3, boom. Almost immediate launch on almost identical launch time, rather, on each one. The Galaxy Note 2 still in tips mode, still giving me some advice. I haven't disabled these yet because I like to be reminded of the new features in the camera, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Let's pop open our email if we can. 1, 2, 3, boom. Stock email app, boom. Very, very, very similar launch times. Let's pop open the dialer. Got to make phone calls even in this day and age. 1, 2, 3, boom. Very nice. And let's go ahead and open the stock browser. We're not going to do Chrome, even though that's becoming the stock browser on many Android devices. Go ahead and find us the internet browser itself. 1, 2, 3, boom. This is Samsung's stock browser. This one, for some reason, loading into XDA. I guess I was over there. Ah, yes, a WebOS story. Now, while we have the browsers in our mind right now, we're going to go ahead and load Pocketnow.com just to see load times. Of course, we're using the same Wi-Fi hotspot, so we're competing for bandwidth. Not a scientific check once again. We're just interested in how the browsers load the page speedily or not. 1, 2, 3, boom. This is not a race. We're just seeing how the full version of Pocketnow.com loads. The Galaxy Note 2 decidedly ahead here. Just doing a little bit of scrolling while the page is loading. Some gaps in the page showing up on each. Now the Galaxy S3 is indicating done before the Galaxy Note 2, which is still actually loading up here, if you can check, and now it is done as well. Alright, so a couple seconds of disparity there. Not really anything to write home about. Let's do the double tap to zoom check. I don't know why we're getting this brightness difference here all of a sudden. Sorry about that. That is not a reflection of the screen. That is a setting change that may have happened in between takes here. I will fix that. Anyway, scrolling performance is looking pretty nice here. Let's get them back down here. We'll fight the glare for a second and do a little bit of this. Very, very nice. Very nice and fluid on each browser. The page is being re-rendered in with more than acceptable speed. Scroll test there. Double tap for column zoom. Pretty responsive. The Note doing a more intelligent column zoom, I think, but minor differences. Really, really excellent browser performance from both of these devices. Finally, why don't we go ahead and hop into a third-party app here. I'm no gamer, but occasionally I do like to fly around, so let's make that Airwing. Tap on the same. We should have comparable launch times here, and I don't think I remembered to turn the sound down. No, of course I didn't. So, the Note 2. Right, everyone settle down. Yes, 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 we like rock music. The Note 2 launching just maybe a second faster there. Do a new game, training mission, carrier day landing. Yes, I will go ahead and perform that carrier landing. F-18 Hornet sounds great to me. I'll do it over here. While we're waiting for that to load, we'll do it on the Galaxy S3 as well. Continue. F-18 Hornet sounds excellent to me. Select aircraft. Loads the mission. Comparable times here. There we go. This game isn't actually formatted properly for either of these screens. It does do a little bit of stretching here. And there we have accelerometer based. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you for the tutorial. Please skip it. And you can tell here, maybe you can't. Graphic performance just fine with this very low impact game. This is just to show the devices are equally competent in average entertainment apps. I suppose I could just as easily open Angry Birds and show you that. Obviously, the quad-core powerhouse inside the Note 2 is a real beast here. We'll have to evaluate its true gaming performance in another venue. One thing to note, though, as this applies to media as well, the Note 2's speakerphone considerably louder than the Galaxy S3's. And bassier. Oh, maybe I'll up the throttle. I'm going to crash anyway. There we go. Well, instant death is upon us. Yes, terrain. While we're on the subject of graphics, we haven't had time to fully evaluate the Note 2's camera yet, but it definitely seems on par with the Galaxy S3's, which makes sense considering that it looks like it could be the same model. The software, though, has undergone some tweaks. You can see that Burst Shot no longer requires selecting a special mode. You just hold down the shutter button. And you have extra shooting modes available here as well, compared to the SGS3, at least the American version here, with Best Photo and Best Faces showing up. Those options not available in the SGS3, but we wouldn't be surprised to see them eventually pop up when Jelly Bean arrives to America's shores. Finally, and very quickly, we would be remiss not to point out the Note 2's other huge differentiator, the S Pen. It's not your grandfather's stylus, and the amount of added functionality it brings is rather extreme. Whether you find that added functionality useful or not is another question, one you can answer by watching our S Pen lesson video from last week, but it's definitely a point in the Note 2's camp.
So after our first hands-on with the Galaxy Note 2 at IFA in Berlin, a lot of internet commenters were saying the same thing we were thinking. The Note 2 is a lot more similar to the Galaxy S3 than the original Note was to the Galaxy S2. Samsung has really pulled no punches in trying to convey the message that these two devices are not just in the same family, but are actually very, very close siblings. So that might be a push toward making the phablet form factor more of a mainstream concept, and if so, it's easy to hazard a guess that it might work in this case, because S Pen aside, the Note 2 is very, very much a blown-up Galaxy S3, and that's a good thing, as far as we can tell so far. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Michael with Pocketnow.com. Be sure and stay tuned for our full review of the Galaxy Note 2 later in the week. There will also be a lot of feature articles and in-depth videos leading up to that review and following that review, so keep it locked to Pocketnow.com for that. Leave us a comment at Pocketnow.com if you have something to say. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you should do that. Pocketnow Tweets is the Twitter account name. If you want to follow me, do it at your own risk, at Captain2Phones. Really, though, thank you very much for watching. Throw us a like if you liked the video. We'll look forward to bringing you more Galaxy Note 2 coverage and every kind of mobile coverage in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.